Matthew is going to talk about industrial data. And he works at HubOcean, one of the Iliad partners. He works with industry, particularly creating data sharing flows in the energy sector. We have ocean energy is one of our thematic areas in the Iliad. He has a background that bridges both science and businesses, and he is going to talk about how HubOcean is working on industrial data. He has experience, accumulated experience from oil and gas exploration, the marine data acquisition, and developing data science applications, creating products, and consulting and project management. So you have a broad background, Matthew. So we are looking forward to learn about how you are dealing with industrial data in HubOcean.
Thank you, Bente. I'll just get my screen shared. I hope you see that okay there.
Yes, we do.
Great. So yes, I'm going to tell a slightly different story to the previous two presentations, which is less focused on the sort of, let's say, technical aspects and more on what interoperability can do in this domain of discovering and sharing industry data, which is something we're very passionate about at HubOcean. We're also involved in the Iliad project as trying to deliver on the interoperability aspects, but I'm going to talk a little bit more on this other work and why it's relevant to interoperability. So first, a very quick introduction for those of you who don't know so much about us. We're a non-profit foundation based in Norway, and we're really part of multiple different domains, really. We're founded in a sort of industrial group in Norway, the ARCA group. We're in a network in the World Economic Forum, but also parts of kind of scientific and intergovernmental initiatives, you know, working closely with the UN Decade, the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, and of course, a proud member of the Iliad project. So, you know, we're really working to, what we say, unleash the power of data for ocean health and wealth. And we're doing that by trying to bring together different data sets, much like you've heard in the ways done by others here as well, bringing together open data, dispersed data, which maybe is like research data that's in focused areas, and industry data, which is perhaps more locked away, private, not shared so widely at the moment. We're bringing that together. We're also creating an ocean data platform as a way to interact and use data in the cloud, and to bring this data together in one place, and well, not just one place in the world, but bring it together so it can be used within our infrastructure and without it and outside of it, and to be used by multiple people, multiple different user groups in multiple different ways for lots of different use cases. So we're going to focus here on, like I say, the industry data, but already from this schematic, I would just like to highlight, of course, that interoperability is sort of critical to the success in multiple ways. It's critical to make sure that data from different sources works together. It's critical to make sure that different data types work together. And it's critical to make sure that data is used in as many different ways as possible, that it's harnessed to its maximum potential. But first, I think it's always important to frame what we're talking about, because people have different ideas what we mean by this. But industry data, you know, first of all, in this context, we're focusing on, you know, of course, ocean data from mainly ocean industries. I'm going to take examples mainly from the oil and gas sector and the offshore wind domain, but of course, there's many other opportunities and options here. You saw all the different pilots and twins being developed in Iliad through aquaculture and water quality and all sorts of different industries, shipping, you know, and we work across many of these. But if we focus on that, we can divide in oil and wind, we can divide into, say, the very industry-specific data. And this is stuff in the oil industry, like the subsurface data, seismic data, production data, well data. And on the wind side, it's the local data, like the actual wind speed at the turbines, the power generation, the turbine performance. So that's one sort of one category of the data. And the other side is all the other data that you need simply to operate and work and have installations that are in the ocean environment. and to do that sustainably and effectively and safely. And that's all sorts of things like environmental surveys, meta-ocean measurements, and all sorts of others. We'll go more into that. But really, there's this whole host of sort of secondary data that's needed, and that's our main focus here. I'll take examples from that first set as well, the industry specific, because it's just useful context and good examples. But these are both very interesting. And then why are we working on this kind of data? Well, we believe that there's a real potential for this data to bring a lot to the world in many different ways. If you look at the snapshot of the North Sea, of the different licenses and the different installations that exist and have been in the North Sea, they're pretty numerous and spread over the whole sea. When we're talking about twins and analysis and really taking science and all sorts of things to the next level, then we want data from more places, more sources, more data. This all contributes to what we want to bring together into these digital twin and different infrastructures. When we talk to oil and gas companies, then even if they exclude all of the kind of primary data like seismic data and costs like this, they tell us that they've spent vast quantities of money acquiring this other data that they practically don't use, but they have spent that money, it's been acquired, and we think that there's value in a lot of it if we can find the right ways to get hold of it and get people using it. So I'm going to just talk through a few examples here to illustrate the situation a little bit. And first, I'm going to start with oil and gas data on the business critical side. And now we're not trying to get hold of this data or really use it like seismic data in our platform, but I think it's a really interesting example because you might think that this data is so sensitive and never used and more difficult to share than any other type, but because it's so valuable and it's used so widely, actually it has fantastic standards, comprehensive regulations. It's very easily shared between different companies and authorities. So it's actually a huge investment into the sharing of that data. The problem is actually when you go to the data that's less valuable or less known about, and that data hasn't had the same kind of treatment. If we think about offshore wind, which this is just stick. I need to answer the poll. Okay, there we go. If we think about offshore wind, then it's a more immature industry. It's growing very fast, but there's still some really interesting examples. This is wind data that operators had to share with the Marine Data Exchange in the UK, and by sharing that, a company, TGS in this case, took that industry data together with public data to create an improved local wind model. So that's a sort of nice closed loop where industry has shared some data, it's been brought together with existing data, and to create an even better data product, which actually then benefits industry again and others in the same domain. It's quite a neat little example of the kind of synergies you can get from sharing data. But then, as I've mentioned, there's all this other sort of data we're talking about. Sensors on installations. You saw that map, densely points throughout the North Sea. All of these are potential opportunities to measure data and share data. And the existing state of this is really very scattered and mixed. There is some data sharing from some companies in some contexts, but it tends to be very kind of project by project. It's not universal, it's not coordinated. And really that kind of takes away the main value of it. The fact that if you had this coordinated attempt to get this data, you would really have this really fantastic network of sensors and arrays that you could use for all sorts of fantastic applications. And the final one here is kind of more sort of survey data and monitoring data that perhaps is done periodically. That's things like site surveys before installations, ecological surveys. And again, some of this is released. There's some regulations requesting that data, but it really often falls through the gaps in these industries because it's not the primary data that they work with on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes there aren't data managers who are actually assigned this data to look after it and make sure that it is used and that it's described and that it's possible to share. And in addition to that, there's also this sort of secondary data, and this is other things that we're working on now. So when there are ROVs doing monitoring operations and installations, there's all sorts of other data that could be acquired in the same loops, measuring current data and things like this. We've had some very clear messages from sort of ocean modeling scientists that one of the things they lack the most is subsurface data, because they have quite good control at the sea's surface, but at the sea bottom it's much harder. So getting data from these monitoring from ROVs that are doing sort of sea bottom surveys would be really valuable. So yeah, just to mention, these bottom two that we at HubOcean are really focusing on here, getting sensor data and surveys. And we are establishing pilots to test out different ways of doing this from different contexts for this, because I think whilst there are examples of it, it's quite an immature domain, this kind of data sharing. It's not so coordinated, and really we need to kind of raise this and try and overcome some of the barriers to get more data shared. And that, that's a sort of complicated topic that I could spend a lot more than 10 minutes talking about. But some examples, and in addition to all of the ones I'm going to say now, there's legal concerns and commercial concerns and all this other stuff. But just purely practically, often companies don't know what to share. They don't know what use cases exist, so they don't know why they would do it. There aren't standards for them to share. It's very ad hoc. One-on-one, one research institute gets one set of data. The ownership is very fragmented. So all of this means that interoperability isn't really invested in. The data isn't described so well. This whole thing fits together. Use cases then are harder to find because the data isn't interoperable. And this cycle continues, really. Regulations aren't put in place, so people don't know what to share. So really, we need to break through some of this stuff, and we need to identify very clearly what data exists, how to share it better, and why to share it in the first place. And the main ways that we can go about doing this is getting more examples of data that are valuable, making it easier to share that data, make it easy to access that data and use it for a wider range of purposes. And really, this is at the heart of interoperability. And then using that in a way that shows why it was good. And I think the more times we can tell these stories, the more times we can prove this data, I think the more data we will manage to unlock and be able to use for all sorts of great purposes. And I'm just going to end by mentioning some of the things going on in the Iliad project that are very relevant to this. And I think there's lots of things that can contribute to all of these elements. There's work to get better data exposure from industry, so it's easier for them to do that. Better interoperability with Ocean Information Model, better discoverability through the data and services catalog, and better demonstration of these values. So Iliad has the potential to do a lot of great things in this domain, and yeah, so it's a very exciting time. And that's really that's my 10-minute message for today. And I'm just going to end by saying thank you and leave you with a little call to action here, which is those 3 questions I ask about. I think we really need to make sure that when there are good examples, that we tell them and that everyone knows about them.